Well, welcome to H360 Health Talk. I'm here today with Amy Rubin, who is the founder of Mindful Self. Well, Amy started her career as a classroom teacher in Randolph, New Jersey, and after completing her mindfulness-based stress reduction certification, she founded Mindful Self to combat the stress and anxiety epidemic affecting students younger and younger. Today, Amy offers professional development for teachers, family meditation classes for individual mindful mentoring, tutoring to reach the greatest audience and share strategies and mindset she wishes she had when she was younger growing up. Well, Amy, welcome to the table for the first time.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So, Amy, tell me a little bit about Mindful Self. I went to your website. I'm very fascinated with what you're doing. Tell our viewers and our members a little bit about your company.
So Mindful Self, as you said, I offer a number of different types of services as a way to try to infuse some mindful living techniques into all of our lives. But I specifically focus on working with students and with teachers. So I provide a number of different types of professional and personal development workshop trainings to help to bring about that mindset that we talked about before, because I truly believe that what we practice grows stronger. And so Mindful Self has given me an opportunity to be able to make the greatest change in the lives of educators, but also in the future of Americans.
Now, being an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs I know, especially in our area of healthcare or mindfulness, started their companies because of a personal experience or a family experience. Was that the case with you?
Absolutely. You know, so much of me and my business and my intention is a result of my own struggles. I struggled my whole entire life and continue to with anxiety, and not depression, but repression, as I call it. And I've also come from a very long line of silent warriors and suffering warriors. I've experienced a lot of different crises in my life and sicknesses and watching my loved ones suffer, from friends to family members who struggle with depression, lots of different types of cancers and sicknesses that really can come to impede our overall wellness and general enjoyment of life. And so for me, Mindful Self really kind of gives me an opportunity to help to suggest different ways that we can just be. It's tough to be human, you know, is really what I've come to learn in life. And so Mindful Self gives me the opportunity to be able to, like I said, make that difference.
Yeah. So repression, tell me about that. You said depression, but then you said repression. Yeah. Tell me about that.
That's my own little play on words, where I feel like, you know, I struggle with difficult emotions and expressing them appropriately. And so in my life, in my experience of dealing with anxiety and difficult situations, I would build up walls, not even realizing it. I thought they were coping mechanisms to help me to kind of, you know, keep myself still pushing forward and continuing to do what I needed to do. And as I've kind of really come to learn, especially in my mindfulness practice for myself, you know, we can't expect to experience joy if we don't allow ourselves to experience suffering. And so I reached a point where I would say, I manage a lot of stress, but is there a better way?
Yeah.
And that's really what kind of brought me to the cushion. In addition to, about 4.5 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with end-stage liver cancer. And at the time, there were very few options, and the disease had progressed so much that they had given him a 6-month prognosis. And, you know, we were at the point as a family trying to make memories. Yeah. And how difficult that was, because what I was really dealing with was that anticipatory grief. And I needed to find a way that I could be present to be able to make memories and enjoy it, rather than, you know, struggling in that sadness and worry and fear and lack of control. Yeah. And so meditation really kind of was the perfect answer for me at that point. And that's really when I began to deepen my own personal meditation practice. As we say in meditation, people don't normally come to the cushion because they've fallen in love or won the lottery.
Right.
There's normally some type of, you know, life change or something that makes us realize that we need something better, or we need something different for ourselves.
You know, you hit on a couple of good points that I've heard before. And, you know, I understand, you know, a lot of your work is with younger and younger students. Mm-hmm. And, you know, technology can be a great thing. Social media can be a great thing. But when I see and I hear about the negative side of technology or the negative side of social media, and I'm referring predominantly to cyberbullying, and people expressing their ways or how they're feeling, it's gotten to a point, I think, where it's easy to sit behind your iPhone or your smartphone and type things out, right, and let things fly on social media. Where, I might not express to you, if I had to look you right in the eye and express a feeling or a displeasure or something going on in our relationship, I might be a little softer face to face than I would behind the cloak of Twitter or one of the other platforms. Do you see a lot of younger students kind of struggling with that?
I do. And I think that it also, regardless of the fact of, cyberbullying, that's a big issue. But it's also the fact that it crosses boundaries. You're no longer leaving school at school. You're bringing it home, and it's coming into your living room, and it's coming into your bedroom, and it's very pervasive. And so it breeds a feeling of insecurity, and it breeds a fear of missing out on something because you're aware of what other people are doing, as well as the fact that it breeds a sense of fear and lack of safety. And that's something that I hear so much from parents that I work with, as well as the students that I work with. And, as parents, I think that we really kind of have to help to guide our students when it comes to making it and modeling those healthy boundaries, right? Technology is ever changing, and it's becoming more and more and more present in our lives. And so, there is no manuscript for parenting, there is no manuscript for how to, manage technology and the impact that it has on our children's lives. And so it is a really important issue and a difficult thing that we have to kind of talk about, because I think as a parent we can both agree there's a fine line between protecting your child and sheltering your child.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And so it's a challenge that I think we face, and everything changes, everything's impermanent, and when you think you've solved this problem, well, then there's the next one.
Yeah.
Right?
And looking at your website, you refer a lot to the mindful student and the mindful teacher. And I want to go back to another thing you said about, school used to be left at school, right? When the 3 o'clock bell rang and you got on the bus or you walked home, that was it for the day. But now school, there's this blurred line, right? And so you talk about the mindful student, you talk about the mindful teacher. How do those two go hand in hand? And then how do you ensure that there's clarity between the mindful student and teacher and the mindful child and parent? There's this chasm or this line, and how do you ensure continuity across the two?
Well, so, as a parent and as an educator, as well as just as a human being, you're right, we wear a lot of hats, right? And so that's why there's a lot of crossover in the work that I do. But at Mindful Self, I do a number of different types of workshops, from mindful parenting workshops, as well as the mindful educator. And when I first started presenting about mindfulness about 3 or 4 years ago, it was still somewhat new. It was still in its infancy. Some people had heard of it, but it was a little bit more elite. And so a lot of my focus at that point was ways as educators that we could simply infuse mindfulness into our classroom. Not as one more thing, right? Because we all have a very full plate and we already have many things we're trying to fit in into a short period of time, but as kind of a change of our approach. We all, as students and teachers, require our students to read, so we could do some mindful reading. We all have to walk in the hallways, so we could do some mindful walking. And so the approach was really, at that point, or my message was about how we could do the things we're already doing, but just change our approach and do them mindfully. And then I would say probably in the last 2 years or so, there's been a real shift in the sense that mindfulness is becoming a very common name and a common word that we hear an awful lot about, from apps that offer the services to books you can read about, articles that are out there. And I think that, my new mission has kind of shifted to the importance of to live it, to model it, to teach it, right? And that as a mindful parent, we can actually make more of a positive impact in our children's lives than infusing mindfulness practices into our house. Just like as a mindful educator, we can make more positive impacts on learning and the learning experience for our students by being and having our own mindfulness practice. Now, obviously, mindfulness looks different for children than it does for adults. And in mindfulness is we have our formal practice, which is where we actually sit and practice training our awareness. And that's oftentimes where you sit on a cushion or you sit someplace comfortably in an upright position. And in mindfulness, what we do is we practice training our awareness on a single point of focus. So we typically use our breath, and the only reason is because we have our breath no matter where we go. But as I work with students, I try to infuse it in a more fun type of an engaging type of way, in which case anytime that we focus our awareness, whether it's on drinking your drink or mindful smelling or mindful listening or mindful looking, right, we have the opportunity to practice mindfulness. And one mindful moment a day is better than none, right? Because the research out there tells us that there are so many amazing benefits to changing our brain and the way that it functions. And not only to bring us those immediate benefits in the moment, but to also bring us the long-term benefits that come through practicing this on a somewhat consistent basis.
So once you understand the kind of the concepts behind mindfulness, do you find that your students and yourself, you just go throughout your day and you're doing it? You don't have to sit and think, okay, it's time. It's coming on noon. It's time for my mindfulness break. You're just incorporating that into the things that you're doing and the activities as you go on through your day?
So for me personally, I do typically sit and meditate in the morning. It's a great time for me, I feel like, to be able to just kind of center myself and sort of do a little bit of a scan to notice what's there that day. And one of the greatest aspects of mindfulness is that it instills and teaches compassion, right? Compassion for ourselves as well as compassion for others. And so that has helped me to be able to learn to listen to my body when it whispers so that I don't have to deal with it when it screams. And whether I'm noticing a pain that day or a sense of energy, there are some days that I would walk into the school and say, today I'm on energy conservation mode. Like, I don't have as much to give today, right? Yeah. And that's okay, because as long as I have that recognition and that awareness, I can make more skillful choices throughout the day for myself. But I also use my mindfulness practice as a reset, as an opportunity to recognize, and I've become almost sort of the master of my experience of being, and I know my own personal triggers. I've started to recognize that when I am really busy thinking or involved in the creative process or working hard on something, that the stress and tension starts to build in my shoulders, and then it starts to make its way up my neck. I used to struggle from debilitating migraines to the point that it pushed me towards going to every doctor under the sun and taking a variety of different types of medications. And none of them were as effective as my meditation has been, because I've been able to recognize those symptoms of this is what too many thoughts do to my body and how I feel that, and then what the effects are of that. Yeah. So therefore, mindfulness can also be used as a reset. We were talking about technology, and I just read something the other day that said that we are actually consuming more text and media that amounts to reading half of War and Peace. And that basically we are receiving and taking in more information than our brains can process. And what happens is that actually activates our stress response. And now our body goes into and our brain goes into that fight or flight mode, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's when we start to experience that like flurry of thoughts, right? We feel like our head is a whirlwind sort of, and we can start to feel that presence of energy in our body as well. And so it can be a really great opportunity for us to just kind of take a moment, whether we're doing a breathing activity or a short mindful minute activity, to just sort of center and allow ourselves to just settle and kind of reset ourselves back to balance, so that then we can proceed.
Now, do some parts of the body scream louder than others? Do you see that when you're working with students and you're really focusing on the mental aspect of mindfulness versus the physical aspect of mindfulness, is one harder to overcome than the other, or did they go hand in hand?
Well, one of the major benefits of mindfulness, especially in working with students of all ages, is the social and emotional component that's involved in it. Because in order to recognize what's coming up, we need to have words for it, right? Yeah. And we'll talk about it as energy and really being able to sort of describe that energy. Like, where do you feel that energy? Mm-hmm. What does that feel like? Does it have emotion? Does it have a texture to it? And really trying to explore that a little bit more. And so then we start to name things, right? And we start to, and that's part of the human design too. When we feel something, then now we want to figure out, well, why am I feeling this way? And I need to justify it and prove to myself as to what's going on. And that actually is what we refer to as recognizing when we're following a thought or a sensation or a feeling down the rabbit hole, right? Yeah, that's when we are basically clinging to it and causing it to actually last for a lot longer than it typically would if we just draw our awareness to it, recognize it, and then allow it to be. Yeah. They say that even strong emotions and thoughts will only typically last for 90 seconds unless we engage with them. So unless we, follow them down the rabbit hole and start diagnosing ourselves, right, and getting overcome. And, with students, you can talk about that thought process of first it's, I can't remember what it was that I studied for my test, and oh my gosh, I'm going to fail, and now I'm not going to be able to get into college, and my life's going to be ruined, and I'm going to be homeless. Right? And how often we kind of participate in those thought patterns, right? As opposed to just simply recognizing like, whew, I'm feeling kind of unprepared for my test. Yeah. And then what can I do to fix that? Okay, so for the parents that are out there watching this, right, and thinking, I can really relate to what you just said. Mm-hmm. Believe me, I have two children, a daughter and a son, both very, very different, this whole Venus and Mars thing, or whatever the book was. I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. I have two boys.
There's something to that. So for the parents that are out there watching this, what are some of the trigger signs, right, so that they can identify this before, the proverbial rabbit hole, appears, and all of a sudden you look up and you realize, man, this isn't exactly what I thought it was.
Yeah. It's hard because obviously, just like you said, every child is different. So everyone's signs or symptoms could be different. Here I've admitted to the fact that I've struggled with my own anxiety from childhood, but yet my younger son struggles from anxiety even, very, very severely for him. And it manifests itself in a completely different way, to the point that I didn't even know that it was anxiety that was causing him the difficulties. So I think that having open lines of communication, right, allowing things to kind of, rather than looking at them as problems, looking at them as opportunities, right? Yeah. And once it comes into our awareness, well, now we can choose what to do with it. As I said before, repression didn't get me very far in life. Ignoring things is not something that ever is going to make it go away. Yeah. And so I work with a lot of high school students, and in talking to their parents in the interview stages, a lot of them have commonly said, it doesn't make sense to me, but it's real for them. Or I thought that it would go away if we just ignored it, but it didn't, and it's only gotten worse. Yeah. So really kind of, having that open line of dialogue and, making it so that everything's okay, right? There are no good and bad emotions. There are comfortable and uncomfortable emotions, right? And that's something that, again, if we can accurately talk about those things and develop an awareness of those things, well, now we can skillfully try to help those problems, right? But if we're just, identifying, and I think for kids, kind of teaching them that connection between how our thoughts typically dictate our emotions, and that those emotions can then cause those symptoms and those sensations that we feel in our body. You might feel sick, you might feel nauseous, you might feel your heart racing, you might notice that you're sweating, right? All of those are a normal reaction in our body's reaction to that strong emotion that you're feeling, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? But if we understand that it's coming from the thoughts and then the emotions, and then this is what's happening, maybe we're not thinking, oh, I'm sick, I need to stay home from school, and the myriad of different thoughts that then that puts us on. And so it's just developing that awareness and just really having those conversations.
So let's turn the coin over for a minute. What about the children watching this show and saying, and listening to this and listening about mindfulness? and thinking to themselves, man, Dad comes home at 6 o'clock and he's wound up tight and he's stressed out from work, or, Mom's working 2 jobs and we're trying to make ends meet. What are some of the things that, do you, first of all, do you have children coming to you and saying, gosh, I noticed these patterns or these things going on in my house? And then how do you advise them to broach the subject with their parents?
Yeah, so kids are very keen observers, and their experience of things is very real and very raw. And I think that sometimes I love to hear things out of the mouth of babes because they're very simplistic. Right. As adults, I feel like we can tend to complicate.
No filter. It just comes out. Right. Yeah.
And so I think that they are. It's about creating that relationship, with your children where we're all in this together. It's not an us against them. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of, the thing that really motivated me the most to start working on my new mission to really kind of revitalize and change the teaching experience. Because I think that we have come to accept that there's just this inherent amount of stress that exists in teaching and learning. And as a result of that, it becomes very isolating. It also becomes something where you're not having fun, right? And that it becomes very stressful. And so being able to kind of break down those barriers, that it's tough to be human, whether you're 5 or 105. Right. There are more things that make us alike than make us different. Right. And so kind of using some kid-friendly terms, but just some common, vocabulary to understand that this is all part of the human experience, So it's been, I have a lot of students who definitely, start speaking about these things and recognizing how different interactions that we have with different people make them feel different ways. And whether it's any adult in their life, whether it's a teacher that has made them feel, judged, or a parent that has made them feel worried or anxious or angry, and being able to sort of navigate that with the understanding that, we don't always respond appropriately or skillfully when we have that flurry of thoughts and things that are going on. And if we just kind of take a moment to calm down, or to recenter ourselves and reset, that then we can, navigate that path a little bit more differently.